welcome back to this week's video. As you can see, I'm still home because I'm planning my travels, and I thought, what better video to do than to let you know all of the things that I've learned in the last 2 years from my travels, because I have learned so much, and a lot of it has changed my character as a result, and a lot of it has influenced me in a lot of ways of how I live my life now. So I'm gonna go ahead and give you all of that info in this video today. Stay tuned and join me.
Travel the world, so just say yes. Choose to do whatever comes next. Just be brave and come along. I wanna do it all.
I'm sure in this new trip that I'm going to be taking soon to Montana, I'm going to learn a lot of new things there as well. So, by the way, I'm filming this in the house because it's just too darn hot outside in Florida right now. We're in May and it was like 93 degrees, so it's super hot outside, and that's why I'm filming this in the house. I got some notes. As you know, I'm not the teleprompter queen. I don't do teleprompter, so I always have my little notes here, my notebook. As I'm getting ready to do this particular new trip with the Caravan, let's talk about what I've learned over the past. And this doesn't have to do with a Caravan only. This has to do with, in general, what I've learned from traveling is that I need to have a reason for why I'm going to a certain place. That's really important for me because that sets the stage of why am I doing this? And the why is always the answer. Is that Missy back there? All right, so I took care of the Missy problem, so she won't be distracting me anymore because she's back there playing around with stuff. All right, so, and I also turned the fan off because I have a fan on Muffin, by the way. All right, anyway, the why is really important spiritually because I want to know that whatever I'm going to get from this trip, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be satisfied. So for me, that also helps me when I do my planning as to where exactly do I want to go and what I want to do at what certain time of the year. So this trip I'm choosing for this time of the year because it's not a kind of place that I'm really interested to go to see in the fall. It narrows down your choices and you get to pinpoint better where you're going. It also helps me spiritually to decide what is it that I want to do on this trip. Not necessarily about places where I'm going to, that's going to also come, but what do I really want to do? Is this a trip where I just want to sit for 10 days camping, like really camping, not really moving, going anywhere, just sitting with nature, maybe writing, reading, relaxing, doing some watercolor, painting, writing some ideas? Or is this the kind of trip where it's going to be just to go and see and that kind of tells me what I want to do on this trip, and it helps me a lot in the planning as well. Breaking it down like this helps me as well as far as budget is concerned, because I try to have a budget for my trip so I don't come back and have to get into debt, because what I do is I use my credit card for my entire trip. Everything that I buy, from gas to food to everything, is on my credit card, and when I come back I pay everything off. But I have to remember that setting a budget means that I have to stop when I'm pretty close to that budget, or when I know that that budget is going to go over or just going to be right at the line coming back home. That means that for this trip coming up, you know, the gas is just under $3 right now, but I'm really foreseeing that for the summertime gas is going to go way over $3. So that means that I may have to turn back and not be able to drive all the way to Montana, because I mean I had a lot of expenditures last year. My well was broken when I got back from my August trip. My AC air conditioner had to be replaced. So, you know, I spent a good chunk of money last year. So this year, for me to recuperate, I've been doing that slowly, but at the same time now I have expenditures for this trip coming up. And of course, YouTube is not paying what they used to pay because they're censoring a lot of us and they're shadow banning a lot of us. So I can't really count on that. So I also have to keep in mind what my budget is and be realistic about it, and realize that, you know, it's okay if I don't get to go all the way to Montana. it's okay. I'm going to see a lot of stuff. I'm going to spend time with the girls. I'm going to have a good time. And it's really not about the destination. It's really about the journey there or on the way there that's important. And will that place be there for me on another opportunity? Sure, why not? I can go there another time. Maybe next time when I'm going to Alaska, I can go and visit Montana. So I'm not really worried about things like that anymore. Before, I used to have to be set in stone with me, but now it's not. I'm very flexible now with my traveling, and that's why I'm so happy and fulfilled in my travels, because I'm so free at this point to do what I want, go where I want, and enjoy traveling the way that I want to, not the way the world tells me that I have to go to an RV park and I have to take this route and I have to do it like this. No, I do it the way that I want. And my experience over the years has shown me that yes, I can. And that's what's so freeing about what I do now. It's really messy. This is what I did. It just did kind of like it's a kind of like a mind map. I do a lot of mind mapping when I'm creating or thinking of ideas. So what I did is just basically put all the points of what I wanted to do, and I'll just give you a couple of them. Like one of them was I want to see and hike beautiful views. I want to be in cooler weather. I want it to be economical. I want to be able to relax in nature. I want to go through scenic drives. So those are some ideas of the pinpoints, because I want to make sure that what I chose over here in my planning aligns with the individual goals that I have for the trip. So I might have one main goal, but are the smaller individual goals going to be under the umbrella of those? And that's exactly how I do that. It's very simple, because I just sit on the sofa watching sometimes some boring video, and I'm writing this stuff down, or I'm in the car stuck in traffic, I'm writing this stuff down, and then I go for the big one and say, okay, where am I going to find all of this stuff? So planning is important for the goals, the budget, and also if you're traveling with a gun. I have learned over the years that now, because I do travel with my concealed license and with a gun, there goes a lot of planning into something like that. So I know that if I have to go through a state that doesn't allow guns, what are the rules there, or how can I get around that state to get to the other state? So that was something that I had to plan for this trip coming up, because we were originally thinking of going to Maine, and then we had to pass through New York and some other things. So we ended up changing that trip. That's the stuff that I've learned that I'm doing now to prepare for the new trip. But I also learned as well about meal planning is important, especially now since I travel for about 30 to 45 days is my travel time. I realized that a lot of recipes, I can choose a certain variety of recipes that I can alternate during the weeks, or have planned out, mapped out on a calendar, and not necessarily cook them on the day, but have a list of 45 meals that are suited for the weather and the climate that I'm going to be traveling to. And that's really important, because why am I going to carry around like canned soup and things like that if I'm not going to eat canned soup in the summertime? You know what I'm saying? So it's going to lessen my load. It's going to be budget friendly for me, and it's going to be more suited to the way that I'm traveling as well. So having those recipes, or the idea of meals, not necessarily recipes, but the idea of what meals I'm planning on cooking on this trip, also helps me tremendously. And similar trips like this, I'll be able to save those lists for similar trips in the future that are the same as this type. So that saves me a lot of time in future planning as well. It also makes it a lot easier to shop for food when I'm traveling. But there's this app called Flip. It's spelled F-L-I-P-P. It has all of the local flyers for your area. So when you get to a destination, if you have Flip on your phone, you can find and look at all the supermarkets in your area that you're traveling and see what the specials for the week are. So when you're shopping, you're also saving some money. So that helps a lot, because I do that here at home, but when I travel, it's something that I haven't been doing, but now I plan on doing that as well, is shopping for sale items. as I'm reaching certain destinations. So that's meals in itself and planning. So traveling with others is another thing, because basically when I started this with my son. So that's pretty easy because it was me and him. But slowly over time, I've had to adapt to bringing other people along. So there's been a lot of changes in my travels every single time that I travel with other people. I realize that everybody's different, and your level of patience, trust me, there has to be patience with people, because they sometimes, they tell you a plan in the morning and they totally change the plan midway. And that's something that's really frustrating to me, because I need to know what's going on, because I also have to plan my day as well. So it means sometimes being adaptable, but not always allowing people to push you around and get their way all the time. And that's when it starts getting frustrating, because you feel that you are adapting too much to their style, and even though you have conversations with them about it, they're not listening to you, or because they don't want to argue, they agree, but then the next day they go ahead and do what they want. And for me, I'm just not willing to go that route anymore. I'm adaptable and I'm patient, but I also want to be respected as well. Also, my need for quiet time as well. I really have learned that in the camper, I like to have my quiet time, especially when I have so much stimulation going on with traffic, and the radios are on, or somebody calls me about this, especially if I'm traveling with a lot of girls. It could be a lot of stimulation in the day. So when I get somewhere, I really need to disconnect. And when I get first to one spot, I'm concentrated on my pets, because I'm taking care of my pets and what I'm going to eat in the day. And it just really bugs me when everybody parks and they're zooming over to me for whatever reason. Now I decided that for this trip, I'm going to have a little door hanger on my door for the times that I need my quiet time. And I'm going to hang it outside my door so that when people come to the mall, they understand that right now, this is my time. When I take the door hanger off, you're invited, you're welcome to come and knock on my door and give me whatever it is. But I need my quiet time, especially after traffic and driving. Sometimes it can be very stressful, and I just want to relax when I get in my camper, take my shoes off and just relax for a while before I have to get to work. Because a lot of times after I get to my camper, I have to work, I have to do videos. So I have to cook dinner, I have to take my pets out. They've been sitting around in the camper all day. Now they want to go out and get some exercise. So it's making sure that I give myself and have people respect that time that I need for myself. You have to be mindful of people that you just met, or that you think that you know but you really don't know. They are acquaintance friends, but you have to be careful, because some people that you really don't know them, they go back to their homes and they're just like your friends when you're at a certain place or a meeting. You also have to be careful with some of those people, because some people have different anger management issues, and they could turn on you on a dime. And I've been in situations where there have been people who have not been nice to me on the road, who were very threatening on the road. Things like this that you have to know when you have to walk away from people like this. I mean, when they start showing you those colors, their true colors, that's when I say you need to step away. You need to walk away from people like that in your life. I'm sorry to tell you, I can forgive you, but I am walking away. I do not want to hang around people that treat me bad, especially when I'm traveling. On the subject of people, we have to talk about people who travel who are not well prepared. They're not well prepared in their campers. They don't fill their tires. They can't reach their tires to fill them. They don't have tools with them. Different scenarios like this where they should really understand that they need to be prepared. They don't have a compressor. The air compressor, if you have tires, that's one of the first things you should have, is a small tire compressor for your tires. You should have a gauge to check your tires, and you should know how to do that. And that's something that I've learned, that there are some people who come on board and they are expecting you to do it, or when they're traveling with you, they're not keeping up with their maintenance and the stuff of their vehicles. So what happens is it's going to also affect you in your travels if they're not taking care of them. Because if we're going to be traveling together, now I have to sit with her at an RV repair shop or something like that. So I have learned that these are important things to look at people and say, you know, I'm gonna lend you my tools today, but seriously, when you get to a store, you need to have some tools, you need to buy some tools. And let me tell you something, if they don't have tools and they're not buying tools, I'm gonna really think twice about traveling with these people, because I know that I'm not gonna be the person that they're gonna be coming to all the time for everything. And it's just wrong to put people in that kind of a place. It's a planned trip for a certain amount of time, and then they say to you, well, when I go home, I have tools at home, I'm gonna gather them. Okay, I have no problem with that. Here's Missy. I have no problem with that. But you know, everybody's got to do their own part as well. Some people have medical conditions and they keep this from you, and that's wrong. So you also have to ask people, you know, you're going to travel with me. Are you medically well to travel? Is there something that I need to know? What about your medications? Where do you have a list of your medications? Because think of it this way. If something happens on the road, you're the next person that the emergency is going to come in contact with. So everybody should have a list of their medications and the emergency contacts in their camper, and each one should know where that is and where the keys are in order for them to get inside. And that's something that I also learned on my trip out west. People buy their campers, they get it all decorated, all perfect, they're afraid to use it, and until their first trip out. You have to know how your RV works. You have to know if the setup that you have on your RV is going to work for you. Like in one situation, we had one of the girls who came out with a brand new generator hitch, and within like the first day, it was already, you know, bad. And that could be a very dangerous situation on the road if this thing were to fall off the back of her RV, and it could have hurt somebody on the road. So it's important for you to practice with these elements that you're adding on to the outside of your RV. You know, like if you're hitching a car and you're towing a car, these things you have to practice with first before you get out on the road, because you want to know if there's something that you have to adapt or change, or if you can even handle this stuff. All right, so before we go into the individual trips, I just want to talk about the events, because during the several events that I did last year, we did a Thanksgiving and a Christmas, and this year we did an Easter trip. So there were a couple of things that I did learn. One was about the Omnia stove, which I had been eyeing for years, since I follow a lot of sailing channels. And because one of the girls had an Omnia stove and showed me about it, I took the leap, and I'm really happy that I did. That's gonna open a whole new world for me this year in my travels as I go out and do a lot of baking on the road. Other thing I learned was hiking apps are great, and I need to learn to use mine. So I have about 3 on my phone that I'm gonna attempt to use this year when I travel, and see which is the one that I best enjoy. Another thing is having a hiking journal in my backpack is something that I wish I would have had in the past, because sometimes there is something that comes inside of you when you see something, when you're in a beautiful place, and you want to write down those feelings or those messages that you get from high above, or things like that that are really emotional, and they just like open your spirit and your heart. So those things I want to be able to capture and have a little notebook and a little like mechanical pencil in my hiking bag so that I can reflect on those things. I also like to draw, and when I did homeschooling with Christian, one of the things I showed him when he was younger, we used to do nature journaling, and I used to love to do that. We actually took some classes nearby here in a park, at a state park, where they taught us how to do nature journaling. So that's something also that I enjoy, and I also want to do as well when I travel. Another thing that's to bring in your backpack, to make sure that you bring bug spray with you. Most of the time my bug spray is sitting in my bathroom in the camper, and guess what? When I go out and then I start walking, I realize, oh, I forgot my bug spray. So it's important to also have bug spray in your hiking backpack. And then another wonderful thing that we've done is to give and share our stuff with others. And that's something that I've learned to look out more for when I'm on the road or sitting at a campsite is to see and look around and see what are the needs of others so that we can also provide for them and help them in whatever ways that we can. This list that I have here is specific. It was my trip to Arizona and New Mexico and all of those states out west that most people go to. I learned a lot of stuff on this trip because I had never been to a place like that before. So basically on that trip, I learned about Reflectix is essential because when you're traveling in the winter months over there, it's super hot during the day, super cold at night. And another thing that I learned was to have cocoa butter stick in my purse and chapstick because during the day it's a dry heat, something I'm unfamiliar with because I'm in Florida and we have more of a humid type of heat. So it's very drying for somebody like me. So during the day when it was really hot, I'd use my cocoa butter stick on my face and I used chapstick. And when it was nighttime and it was cold, had to put the Reflectix. So make sure that you carry Reflectix in your vehicle. The Mr. Buddy, I learned that size does matter for small spaces. So I remember I had bought the bigger, sorry, that's Muffin. She's snoring over here under my chair. So remember that I had bought the bigger Mr. Buddy, and then I realized it just gets too hot and I was turning it on, turning it off, turning it on, turning it off, and it wasn't comfortable because I'd be hot and then I'd be super hot and then I'd turn it off and then I'd be cold again, and it was just not a continuous flow of warm, comfortable warmth. So switching my big Mr. Buddy for a smaller Mr. Buddy with Sandy was perfect because now she had a bigger one for her bigger RV and I had a smaller one. So that worked out really well for us. And having the Mr. Buddy out west during the winter time is essential if you're not using your furnace in your RV. The Jackery and the solar power as well was also something that I took on that trip, and it was super awesome that I was able to have that product with me. And I will be doing a video on the Jackery in the future because I do have some issues that I'm trying to resolve at the moment. So that video will be coming up in the future. But having definitely a battery pack, not necessarily Jackery, and we'll talk about the different brands in that video and other options, but it's definitely worth it because you don't get a lot of sun and you do need like solar. Like I have solar system in my RV, but I wasn't getting enough power all the time. So having that as a backup was always great. I also had an electrical problem inside my RV during that time. So I now carry an extra fuse in there for things like that. It's at an RV park and I had forgotten to turn off an electrical appliance that I had on, and then I switched the switch over on the other side in the kitchen and it blew my fuse. So having an extra fuse is something that you should definitely have in your RV. We're not talking about the tiny little fuses, we're talking about the actual circuit breaker, the black fuse in there. You should have the small ones. I have tons of those, but I tried and it didn't work. It was actually the fuse. And that's important to have as well. At least one. Cat litter, that was something that I learned because when I went out west, in some of these areas where there are little towns, they have one store, and if you have thousands of people that swarm, like in Quartzsite, to live there during the winter, and you have that one store and everybody's buying cat litter, guess what? You're gonna end up with crappy cat litter. And I like to buy the scoopable kind of cat litter, and I can't believe how hard it was for me to find scoopable cat litter. And the other kind of cat litter is really not good for you when you travel, and you have to be on top of that cat litter like a couple of times a day because it just smells so bad. So finding scoopable cat litter is really hard. So I suggest that when you go to the store and you're out west, have an extra one because most likely you are not going to be able to find it if you are in Quartzsite during the time of the year when there's everybody there. Warm pajamas is really important because you want to sleep comfortable and you want to layer because when you go to bed at night, it's not going to be as cold as it's going to get in the middle of the night. So certainly layering your bed, and I did a video on that, on how to layer your bed for comfort in the winter. I can't believe that people leave their slides out during a windstorm. You should be bringing your slides in during a windstorm. You can have a lot of damage, and it's just not going to be good for your RV if you leave. And some of these slides I'm talking about, they're like a whole wall. It's not good for you to have your slides out, especially if you have an entire wall. I know, because remember during the hailstorm, it was a hailstorm, but my camper was in a hailstorm with the slide out, and that's what wrecked the entire RV, was the area where the slide is. So you definitely want to bring those in. Hiking sticks during hiking in gravel is essential. I fell down twice in 2 different occasions hiking out west because there's so many rocks. You have to walk a little bit slower. You have to take it easy, put your foot on the rock, make sure it's not going to wobble, and just don't take for granted that you're going to step on a rock, because there's another rock underneath and then that rock will turn. So having 2 hiking sticks to balance you will keep you from falling, and that's really important. So I have bought hiking sticks as a result of learning that lesson. Another one is hiking ankle boots. Super important if you're also hiking with rocks underneath. You should definitely have some type of an ankle type hiking boot, which is going to secure your ankle. Especially for me, it's necessary for me, and that's what I have. Having a walkie-talkie when you're driving with others, I don't have to tell you that it's essential, because this way you can communicate much easier than fumbling with your phone to make a phone call. And sometimes you don't get cell service. I know we were in Texas. There was a certain part of an area in Texas where we probably drove for a good 40 minutes where we had no cell coverage. For me, water topping off, I learned this because there's so many rest areas out west heading on 10, and I really didn't have to worry about water at all, because every time I got to a rest area, I had my gallon jugs and I went to the rest area and I filled. This was a course, we're talking before COVID, but I was able to fill up a jug, go back to my camper, important. So if I used 1 gallon of water yesterday, I came across a rest area, what I would do is just pull at that rest area over and grab myself a gallon for the usage that I used the day before. On those nights that are super cold, you don't have to have your fridge on as much. So if your power is low, like there were times that my power was low because we had a lot of cloudy days, but the nights were super cold, I really didn't have to have my fridge on. I could unplug it because my fridge is on the floor, and the floor is one of the coldest parts of the RV. And since my heater was pointed up to the top, it wasn't really going to affect the refrigerator on the bottom, all the way at the bottom. So you can actually unplug it. They're made to be well insulated. You can also unplug it and put a blanket around your refrigerator so that's not using up your power at night. That's another option that you have on those super cold days. You can save a lot of power by just unplugging it, just wrapping it in a blanket and letting the cold weather keep it cool for you. You're not going to pet washing RV parks. You're going to have to plan for those things during the day sometime, and you have to plan for the weather as well as when you're going to do that. So if you're going to a state park and you have enough water, or if you're going to an RV park and you want to wash your pet outside, that's another thing you have to plan for the days you're going to be there to make sure that you can wash your pet and the weather is good for that as well. So that's another thing that I learned, that you have to plan ahead, is if you're planning on washing your dog at some point during the week. Another thing I learned was the cost of gasoline can be so much lower in one state, and when you cross the border to the other state, it could be like almost $1 more in that state. And that happened to us in California when I was like, whoa, I really wanted to see a lot of things in California because of the price of the gas at the time. This was before COVID. We decided to not travel during that area. Try to plan for these things so that you can fill up in the state where you don't feel like you need to buy gas in that state. You can fill up ahead. I also learned that hoses get brittle and when it's cold in the morning. So there was one morning when we left an RV park, and I know that my my water, even though my water was off at night, I guess there was still like some water inside the hose, and when I unplugged it in the morning, there was icicles that came out of it. So, and then it was really hard to wrap it the next morning. We were leaving in the morning and it was really hard to wrap because it was so brittle and hard. So we actually had to put our hoses out in the sun for a while to kind of warm them up so that we can fold them and wrap them around. So that's another thing you want to remember, as well as like your tire compressors and things like that. All of those, anything that's wired like that you're going to use in the morning when you're leaving to fill up your tires or your airbags, those are also going to be hard and brittle in the morning and not very flexible for you, and you'll have to struggle a little bit with those. So you may want to fill up your tires the night before so you don't have to struggle with those things in the morning. I learned about temperature and changes in the altitudes and how those affect tires as well. Like sometimes I had to fill my airbags more than others, or my tires, I had to check them more frequently than other times. So that's something else that I learned, especially during extreme changes in weather and altitude. If you have to go to an RV park and you're counting on filling up your propane there, you are going to want to call ahead to make sure that their propane is working, because sometimes it might not be working, and you made a reservation, you end up paying going there, and now you've set up, and now you go to fill up propane, and then you realize that they're not open or they're not working or whatever, or there's bad weather and they won't fill you up because of the weather. So if you have to pay for an RV park because of propane, make sure that you call ahead, or at the time of payment when you're sitting there coming in to make a payment, ask that in advance before you actually pay, because there might be one down the block that you can go to instead. I also learned that when I'm traveling with a caravan with other people, having a microwave is important for me, and I did install a smaller one than the one that was built into my camper because it gives me more space where the microwave was. But it was important for me because sometimes we were traveling, and I had leftovers from the night before, and it's just gonna take a lot longer for me to get out a pan, heat it up, have to wash the pan. So if it was already in a container that I could just microwave and eat it right out of a container, it made my life so much easier. So that was another thing that glad that I brought my little microwave. I don't use it often. I only use it maybe once in a while, but it sure is great to have when I have the ability to use it. Make sure that you have a carrier for your pet in case of any type of emergency. That you can put your pet, like for me, if something were to happen, I would have to contain Missy in a carrier, and I have a foldable carrier for my cat that I can use in case of an emergency. So if you want to know which it is, go down to my Amazon favorites. There's a link below in the description box where it will take you to my Amazon store and all the favorites that I have there. My trip that I did when I was on my way to Miami to visit my mom, it was a very different trip, because the other trip out west, we were moving, kind of like what's going to happen now coming up in this new trip. But on that trip, it was different because we went to Dupuy Campground, and we had reserved 9 days of camping there. So it was a nice quiet place. We're in an area where there's like a really small little town, but even small little towns, you think, oh, there's nothing here, but yeah, small little towns do have things there. We were able to go out for a day and go to the U-Pick, which was so great. As a matter of fact, that's on my list for this trip coming up. If we find like U-Picks for blueberries or vegetables, the food was so fresh and the pricing was so amazing. That's definitely on my list. Also, farmers markets, if we get to find one, those are some that I would love to go to as well. So we'll be doing that as well when we go on this trip, is trying to see if there's local farmers markets coming up for us to go to. We're in a rural area, so always try to have your gas tank filled in a rural area, or check in advance, because sometimes you're going to be for miles. And I learned this out west too, because there were areas that we would travel for like 50 miles and there was no gas stations around. So before you leave in the morning, try to do some research, especially if you know you're going to be traveling through rural areas, to find out where the gas stations, and be very careful because some of those gas stations are going to cost you a pretty penny when you get there because there's nobody else competition, so they can charge you as much as they want. I also learned on this particular trip in Dupuy that because it was warm and there was warmer weather here, to have a chair for muffins. So when I sit outside, at sometimes of the day, it was nicer to sit outside with the breeze than it was to be in the camper with the fan on. So I realized that having a chair to sit Muffin in, she's a small dog and she doesn't like to sit on the floor, but sitting on a chair beside me where I can sit outside and do my videos, read a book or whatever will be nice, so that she can sit with me and be comfortable and also have the comfort of being outside. Another thing is purchasing a fan that you can charge and battery packed. One of the girls showed me one of hers, and that's something that I have to look into, because if I'm outside, it would be great to be able to have a fan blowing on me, and that'll help to keep the bugs away. Have pets with you, especially if you have a cat. Unless they don't like to be outdoors, it's always good though to get the cat out for a little while, even if you have to put a leash or a harness on them and bring them outside, even if you have to hold them in your arms. Maybe sit outside with them for a little bit, because it's good for them to get some sun. They need the vitamin from the sun, and it's good for them. I know sometimes when I open the door, Muffin goes out and she just lays in the sun, and the cat likes to lay in the sun. So when I'm traveling, I make sure that I also remember that they need to be out in the sun. So even though Muffin is going out, she's getting her sun, but I have to remember about my cat who's always indoors. So I make sure that I take Missy out, and I also make sure that she's getting sun during the day when she's outside, in addition to getting some exercise, because she gets a lot of exercise when we're home. She's walking around this property, and then I kind of feel guilty when I'm traveling for a month and she's just like in the camper laying around all the time. So I make sure that I get her out at least 3 times a day. As much as I can, actually. Alright, so that's gonna wrap it up for this week's video. Thank you so much for watching. I'm sure that I will have another video similar to this in the future after this next trip that I'm taking, that we're going to be heading to Montana soon. So stay tuned for all of that. It promises to be a lot of fun, and it promises to have lots of women traveling with us. So I hope you will come back and watch those videos. Have a lovely day. God bless. I'll see you next week. Bye-bye.
Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell.
If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up. Have you ever dreamed of traveling but don't necessarily want to be alone? Well, now you can join the Ghost Squad Caravans. It's not part of a club, but of a nomadic community where uncommitted bonds are formed, where cliques with clubs can form and introverts or newbies to the group can feel left out. We are different. By connecting with other women during your travels, you can enjoy the uncommitted lifestyle that nomadic traveling provides, with an opportunity for you to fellowship, explore, share adventure, and sit with good company. Ghost Squad Caravans are here to give you a place within a space. This is your life, your choice. Make it your best season yet. We provide emergency contact, mentoring, support, group connection, and the ability to share those connections. Ability for you to locate your pals and connect with new ones. Encourage, inspire, but most of all to love with godly love within the nomadic lifestyle.